Thank you guys for coming to the 47th Blazing Defender Report. I am the Blazing Defender. I have a visionary writer as a guest today.
But he canceled, so I'm...
No, I'm very stoked that he's here. Thank you very much. Peter David, visionary Hulk writer for Marvel Comics for 12 years on the Hulk.
Yes, that's
just
right.
on the Hulk alone.
On the Hulk, yes.
That's incredible.
Oh, boy.
He is incredible.
He is the Incredible Hulk. All right, but yeah, my show, the Blazing Defender Report, just for people. I see 3 people out here that probably never heard of me before. I'm a Louisville firefighter, and all the guys in the firehouse that have children are watching the movies. They've become so engrossed in these characters. They want to know where the source material comes from. They come to me and they're like, dude, what about this guy? Why does this guy do this? And why is everybody mad at this dude? And I'm like, man, you need to go check out your local comic book shop. And the biggest compliment that I can get is when a dad takes his son, or his daughter for that matter, and goes to a local comic shop and they find something they bond over. My dad was reading comic books to me before I could even read. So that's the whole goal of my show. And as you could probably tell, I'm not paid by anybody. So the comic books that I read each week, I tell you on my show what I thought was good, what I thought was bad, what I think you just might like. Because I want to spark interest. I don't want anybody to not like something, but I want you to choose for yourself. And I try to kind of guide you on where you might need to go. But I've got a fantastic show lined up for you, with Peter David being here, and that was made possible by Charles McFall and the Giant Size Team Up Network, which I'm a proud member of. And Mr. David, just to let you know that we, out of the network, 4 shows, Charles, am I right? 4 shows are nominated in the 2017 Podcasting Awards. Pokemon Go, Breaking the Panel, Botched, and me, myself, the Blazing Defender Report. So, congratulations to all you guys. It's been an incredible run, and I can't believe I'm sitting here right now with Peter David at DragonCon. It's pretty awesome. I also want to thank my sponsor, Collector Zone. Thank you guys so much for believing in me. They're a small Funko Pop retailer. They're getting into more and more stuff all the time. I've got exclusive codes for people that are here and people at the con. Say 15% off your total order, not just off one thing, but your total order. Ends up being a pretty nice discount when it's all said and done. But I've got those. Hit me up before you leave, and I'll give them to you. And I cannot wait to start this interview. And we're going to do it right now. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right. The writer of many Star Trek novels.
Yes.
Wrote scripts for Babylon 5.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's right.
And the writer of the Activision game, Spider-Man Edge of Time.
That is me.
Incredible. All right. Now, everybody knows about your 12-year run on the Hulk. Most people do. So before we get into all that, I've got some rapid-fire questions for you.
Okay.
Okay, and rapid-fire, just first thing that comes to your mind. Okay? All right. What's your favorite TV channel?
TV channel?
TV channel.
Probably HBO at this point.
Okay. All right. Good enough. If you can turn invisible, where was the first place you'd go?
If I could turn invisible?
Yes. First place.
I'd be afraid to go anywhere. Because if you can't see me, then the moment I try and cross the street, I'm going to get hit by a car.
Oh my God, that I never would have thought of that. That's fucking awesome. That's classic. All right, Star Trek guy. So Kirk or Spock?
To do what?
Just the one that you like the most. Kirk or Spock?
Kirk.
Kirk. Okay. Fuck. I'm 0 for 3 right now because I would have not picked any of those for you. If you could punch one celebrity in the face, who would it be?
Trump.
That's gonna get a lot of
No hesitation. No hesitation.
Favorite superheroine?
Supergirl.
Supergirl.
Nice.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that either. Dale Keown or Todd McFarlane?
Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get back to that because I definitely want to talk about that.
Okay.
All right, the 12-year run on the Hulk, visionary, and the reason I say visionary is Marvel has a visionary line now out, right?
Yeah, I have to admit that breaks me up. You know, when it's say, Hulk visionary, as if I knew what the hell I was doing.
Yes, we're going to get into that because that's a fantastic story.
Vast scheme. I mean, I did have general ideas, but visionary sounds to me kind of absurd. But that's what they call it, so okay.
Can you briefly describe what happened? Was it Dale Gibbons that came in and asked you if you would write the Hulk? You were on Spider-Man.
Dale Gibbons? No.
Was it not Gil? He was
Bob Harris.
Bob Harris, yes. Bob Harris come and asked you to write the Hulk. You had just been taken off Spider-Man.
That's correct.
Your critical acclaimed Spider-Man run.
I was fired off it because Jim Owsley was worried that Shooter was going to fire him. So he fired me off of Spider-Man basically to hope that he could save his job, which I have never blamed him for one moment. He was bucking a lot of internal politics to have me on the book in the first place. So if he fired me off the book in order to try and maintain his job, I totally get that.
Right. So when they came to you with the Hulk, what was your initial reaction when they asked you to write the Hulk?
I was somewhat stunned because there had been so much aversion to me writing for Marvel Comics on the part of editorial, because I worked at the time in the direct sales department. I was the direct sales manager. And at the time, editorial had a very simple policy, which was if you worked on if you were creative, you worked on the editorial side. If you worked in the business side, you could not be creative, because if you were creative, you'd be working in editorial, QED. The fact that I came in and started knocking the wheels off of this Marvel trolley put a lot of noses out of joint. Plus, the fact that I was writing Spider-Man made a lot of people pissed off, because their attitude was, Spider-Man is our flagship character. He's the guy that you work your way up to. You don't get Spider-Man first crack out of the box. And the fact that it was being critically acclaimed and the sales were going up just made it worse. So when Bob came to me and proposed my writing the Hulk, I was astounded, because I thought that I was persona non grata in editorial. But what Bob told me was that there was literally, and I mean the correct use of the word, literally nobody else to write it. Bob had gone to every writer that Marvel had. He'd even gone to every editor that Marvel had and asked them all to write the Hulk. And no one was interested. He could not get anyone to write the Hulk. The Hulk was almost sort of the punishment book at Marvel Comics, and nobody wanted to touch it. So if Peter David was going to write the punishment book in Marvel Comics, nobody gave a rat's ass about that. So, okay, yeah, sure, let Peter David write the Hulk. It's much better than him writing Spider-Man. And I had ideas for maybe 6 months worth of stories. So I told him that I would do it for 6 months. And 12 years later...
12 years later.
I was fired off the book. So, there's at least some continuity to my existence. When I was reading up on the Hulk, what triggered my overall story was I read a story that had been credited to Bill Mantlo, although Barry Windsor Smith also claims to have written it, in which we see Bruce Banner's youth and his incredibly abusive father and all the abuse that Bruce suffered as a kid. And that triggered me thinking, because I thought, that is the base reason why people develop what was then called MPD, multiple personality disorder. Generally, it stems from child abuse. And I thought, this is an interesting thought. What if the reason that Bruce has never been able to cure himself of being the Hulk is that he's only been approaching it from the physical point of view? That the Hulk is actually an internal problem. That would explain why he's never been able to cure it. I mean, that, and if he cures it, the book's over. But, that would be an interesting approach. And what if we brought in someone to treat Bruce Banner as what he is, an MPD. Because I realized that what that meant was that if Bruce Banner had never been hit by gamma radiation, he still would likely have developed, and maybe even already had developed, multiple personalities. That we had never seen in all the years that we've been reading about Bruce's adventures, we'd never seen a fully integrated, normal Bruce Banner. We'd only seen the different personalities, the Bruce Banner personality, the Green Hulk personality, the Gray Hulk personality. It would also explain why Bruce has been changing over the years. I mean, let's remember that when the Hulk first started out, he had a day-night switch. That's what triggered the change. Right. The whole concept that he became the Hulk because Bruce Banner became angry, that was something that developed later on in the series. So the notion that Bruce's problems were all stemming from child abuse made a huge amount of sense to me. And I realized that what I should do is start laying the groundwork for this, and then eventually do a story in which the one psychiatrist in the Marvel Universe, Doc Samson, with the aid of the one hypnotist we've got, the ringleader, will use hypnosis to try and merge Bruce Banner into one Gestalt being. And that is exactly what I wound up doing something like 4 years later, in which that issue ended with, Betty is concerned, and she's starting to head for the door, and the door opens, and and the Hulk walks in and says, "Honey, I'm home." And it is a different Hulk than we have ever seen. Now, I'll tell you where that concept came from.
Now you mean the Gray Hulk with?
No,
okay.
I mean the merged Hulk.
The merged Hulk.
What was later deemed by Paul Jenkins the Professor Hulk, a term I have always hated. He's the merged Hulk. Back in Incredible Hulk number 6, drawn by Steve Ditko, they did a storyline in which, at the time, Bruce would trigger the transformation by stepping in front of a gamma gun. And he steps in front of the gamma gun to go fight the Metal Master. And his body transforms, but his head does not. He's the Hulk with Bruce Banner's face. And, it's the pigmentation is normal pigmentation, it's not green. And he's going, "Oh my God, I've got Bruce Banner's face. What should I do?" Well, as coincidence would have it, Bruce had been building busts of the Hulk's face so he could study it. Why? No clue. So he used this handy head to make a rubber mask, like something out of Mission Impossible. He pulls the rubber mask onto his head, goes off to fight the Metal Master, gets his ass kicked. He's lying there unconscious. The army shows up, and they go, "It's the Hulk, he's unconscious." And they go, "He's wearing a mask." And they grab the mask, and they pull it off, and what does it reveal? The Hulk's face. He wound up changing later on. So it served no purpose whatsoever in terms of the story. But I always remembered how freaking weird he looked when he had the Hulk's body and Bruce Banner's head. So I said to Dale Keown, "I want you to do that now. I want you to have him have the Hulk's body, but Bruce Banner's face. It should be colored green, But I want him to have Bruce Banner's face." And that's exactly what he gave me. And it looked awesomely weird.
Yeah, it did.
Awesomely weird. It was just incredible.
So back to now your first iteration of the Hulk was the Gray Hulk. Where did that come from? Like the intelligent Gray Hulk, because people didn't get a warm reception from fans.
Well, first of all, I bear no brunt for that because I didn't do that. Al Milgrom did. I am typically credited with restoring the Hulk to gray, but I didn't do that. Al Milgrom made that choice. Okay. Now, where did he come from? he came from the first 6 issues of Incredible Hulk. When the Hulk first transformed into the Hulk, in issue number 1, he had gray skin. They decided as of issue 2 to change it to green because of production concerns. They couldn't come up with a steady color of gray, a steady shade of gray. So they turned it green as of issue 2. And in later years when they would reprint issue number 1, he would be green. But the longtime fans know that he was gray from the outset. So Al Milgrom wanted to change the Hulk's incarnation. So he changed him back to the original gray Hulk. And the way that Al wrote him was very much in that Hulk's personality, because in the very early days, particularly in the first issue, his diction was fine. He understood the concept of personal pronouns. And indeed, by the time issue 6 rolled around, his type of diction was no different than the Thing's. He just talked like a normal thuggish type of guy. The whole Hulk smash thing, again, did not come on until later years. But Al Milgrom simply restored him to his original identity. And he then took Rick Jones and made Rick Jones the Hulk. And Bob Harris presented me with a choice. He said, if you want, you can do the adventures of the green Rick Jones Hulk. Or you can do the gray Hulk, Bruce Banner. And I said, I'm definitely doing the gray Hulk. I mean, as far as I was concerned, Rick Jones should not be a superhero. He should be the one normal freaking guy in the Marvel Universe. So I got rid of the green Rick Jones Hulk as fast as I humanly could. And but yeah, I'm typically credited with Al Milgrom's decision to make him gray. But no, that was all Al.
So I want to talk a little bit about the safety that you gave Betty Ross when you first got on the book.
Okay. What do you mean specifically?
Well, I kind of want you to talk about it, but why did you give her safety in the beginning?
I'm not sure what you mean. Oh, okay, I know what you mean. Okay. Okay, I'm going to respond to that with an actual story, okay?
Perfect.
Many years after I started on the book, my editor called me up to discuss the future direction for the book, and she said, I want to bring up something, and it's kind of personal, and if I'm stepping over a line here, please tell me. And I said, okay, go ahead. And she said, you've always said that you would never kill Betty because Betty is your wife's favorite character. And I said, yes, I have said that. And she said, okay, well, your wife is divorcing you. Do you still feel that way? And I said, are you suggesting we kill off Betty Banner because I'm divorcing my wife? And she said, it did occur to me. And I said, fine, let's ditch the bitch. And I killed off Betty. And indeed, her time of death was exactly the time and day that my divorce became finalized. Now, no one in the world would know that at the time, and I certainly did nothing to let the fans know that that's why Betty was dying. And again, I want to emphasize, it was my editor's suggestion. It likely would never have occurred to me. And if I'd known that I was going to be leaving the book one issue later, I never would have done it. Never would have done it. Because I had a whole storyline dedicated to the Hulk's reactions after Betty dies. And Marvel ordered me. They said, okay, yeah, this whole storyline you want to do? No, that's not what we want. We want the Hulk to become a silent mass of rage who goes around destroying everything in the Marvel Universe. And I said, why would he do that? And they said, well, because he's reacting to Betty's death. I said, but that makes no sense. that's not how the Hulk would react. The fans will know that is not how the Hulk would react. That would run counter to the character that I have been writing and developing for 12 freaking years. So I'm sorry, guys, I'm not going to write that. And they said, okay, then don't let the door hit you on the way out. And that's how I wound up, being off of the Hulk. Bobby Chase was the one who told me that I was fired, and she was sobbing over the phone. I mean, Bobby was incredibly upset. Indeed, I wound up, she's calling to tell me I'm fired off the book, and I wind up consoling her because she was just not in a real happy place. And then they brought in John Byrne to write exactly the stories that they wanted, and sales, of course, immediately tanked. And some months later, they brought in Paul Jenkins to restore the book to the psychologically based stories that I've been writing for 12 years, and suddenly sales went up again. So, gee, what a shockaroo that was.
How does that whole experience working with Marvel, I mean, you did a fantastic job on everything they asked you to do. I mean, how does that make you feel now when you look back on your time at Marvel?
All I can tell you is that every single person who was involved in me being fired off the book is no longer there. And I'm still there. So I
win! So after you left Marvel, after you left the Hulk, what did you do then? Where'd you go? What did you start to do?
Let me think. Well, I was working for both Marvel and DC. I believe I was still doing Spider-Man 2099.
What were you doing for DC?
I wrote several books for them. I wrote Young Justice.
Okay. Yeah.
I wrote Aquaman. I wrote Supergirl. So those were, and I did occasional one-shots and that kind of thing too. So I was working for both Marvel and DC, and keeping myself active.
Sure. I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know if you have a fascination with this or not, but it seems like Future Imperfect. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
Where did the idea of the Maestro come from?
Oh, the Maestro? Well,
Maestro.
My feeling was that since we had psychologically merged the Hulk's personalities, as he got older, I thought that he would basically become more and more like his father. Because eventually sons typically turn into their fathers. And what would happen if Bruce Banner effectively turned into dear old dad? And I thought he would become the Maestro. He would become the most badass supervillain in the history of Marvel Comics. So that is really where the Maestro came from. He was effectively Bruce Banner emulating his father, because his personality had been fully integrated, and unfortunately that didn't turn out the way that Doc Samson was hoping that it would.
In Future Imperfect and in The End, the Hulk, The End,
Yes.
Which I just recently read. I had never read it before, and I was doing some research, and I found it, and I was like, oh man, this looks awesome. And it was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
If you have not read Hulk, The End, it's a one-shot. It's a self-contained story.
Marvel actually has an edition out that has both The End and Future Imperfect in it.
Oh, nice.
So that's really cool.
That's really nice. Okay, talking about those two stories, they're both kind of futuristic stories.
Yes.
Do you lean toward that? Do you like futuristic settings for some reason in your storytelling?
No. These came from two different points of view.
Okay.
Future Imperfect started when some Italian artist wanted to work with Marvel. And Bobby wanted me to write a Hulk story that would key to his strengths. And one of his strengths was drawing these bleak dystopian cities and backgrounds. And she wanted me to come up with a story that would take place with the Hulk in a bleak dystopia. And what I thought was, why don't I flip-flop Terminator? Instead of having something come from the future into modern day and cause havoc, let's have the Hulk go into the future to face something that only the Hulk could stop. And when I thought about it, I said, what could the Hulk be the only thing in the world that could stop another Hulk? And that was the core of the beginning of the Maestro. The end resulted from, I was editing, I should say, a Hulk short story collection called The Ultimate Hulk, which was before the Marvel, the Ultimate line. So it was not actually anything to do with the character that would eventually be called the Ultimate Hulk. It was a Hulk short story collection. And in addition to editing the thing, I decided that I would write the last story. And I thought, well, what would the last Hulk story be like? And it was mostly a point of view story of Bruce Banner wandering around this aimless, this desert,
Wasteland.
that was this wasteland, occasionally being attacked by killer cockroaches and regenerating. It was a very internal story. I was later contacted, some years later, by Bobby Chase. I think I may have actually even written it before I wrote Future Imperfect. It's quite possible. And Bobby Chase said, we're starting a story series called The End. And what The End is supposed to be is the last stories of various Marvel characters as written by writers who were very closely associated with them. Would you be interested in coming back and writing a one-off of the last Hulk story? And I said, well, here's the problem. I already wrote a last Hulk story. It was called The Last Titan, and it ran in this Ultimate Hulk short story collection. And she said, well, we own that story. Would you like to adapt that into a 48-page story that Dale Keown is going to pencil? Well, having a chance to work with Dale again was very attractive, but I thought, how in God's name am I going to adapt 48 pages of Bruce Banner walking around a wasteland thinking about shit? And, how do I turn that into 48 pages?
What was the original story? How many pages was the original short story?
I don't remember, like 10 or 11, something like that.
God.
How can I possibly do this? And eventually I said, okay, you know what? I'll give it a shot. And I did add some stuff like that whole storyline with in the original story, Bruce is just being followed by a remote camera. And I never actually established where that camera came from. In Hulk the End, I established that not Sentinel.
That was a recorder.
A recorder. That a recorder showed up and basically said, yeah, okay, I just thought you should know that human beings are almost extinct, except for you. I'm going to leave this recorder here to follow your final days so that we can have a recording of your humanity, of the human race being extinct. And Bruce says, is this a really big deal? And they say, and the recorder says, oh yeah, the Kree and Skrull have joined forces to throw a killer party, because they're all so happy that you're all dead. And the best thing was I had the recorder say, yes, one other thing. When you speak your last words, please enunciate. Your race had a tendency to mumble. Thank you. And the recorder disappears. And I love that line. Your race had a tendency to mumble. And it's gone.
It's not your typical Hulk story at all. And the reason I say that is when people buy a Hulk comic book, you win Hulk Smash, typically. But how many issues can you do with that shit, right? And it's going to get old eventually. And you changed it. You made the Hulk a deeper character. Yeah. With the emotional aspect of it. And in the end, which I thought was really good, is that you got these two people. Essentially, you've got Hulk and Banner. You stop me whenever I'm wrong, because I probably will be. Trust me, I do this all the time. So you've got these two people, and they're both kind of dealing with their isolation.
Yes.
And Banner's kind of like, man, I want this shit to end. I'm sick of it. He's not able to die yet because of the Hulk's physiology. He's still keeping him alive, but he's real old. He's not getting around as well as he was. Yeah. And then when the Hulk transforms, because he tries to kill himself. And the Hulk's not letting that happen. And then the Hulk's like, no, Hulk is the strongest one there is.
Yeah.
No, like, Hulk don't care. Hulk don't need nobody. Hulk just wants to be left alone. So, you know, you think, okay, well, the Hulk's cool with this, right? Mm-hmm. So you've kind of got this battling ideology between the same person, essentially. Yeah. And then, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm going to.
It came out 50 years ago.
Right. Well, I kind of want people to read it. But it's the journey. It's not so much the end. It's the journey, how the Hulk gets there at the end.
Fine, I'll blow it for you.
He wrote it. He can spoil it.
On the first page, in Bruce's narrative, he's talking about the weather, and he says, I feel cold. And at the climax of the story, Bruce feels like his body's giving out. And he's begging the Hulk to just let him die. And we have this explosive confrontation in Bruce's head, saying like, please let me die. Betty's there. She's calling to me. They're all calling to me. Let me go, please let me go. And the Hulk is going, no, I'm not going to let you do it. And their minds are fighting, and the Hulk's mind basically overwhelms Banner's mind. And at the end, the Hulk is sitting there going, Hulk did it. Hulk finally got rid of Banner, and yes, there are still the bugs, but I'll still get rid of them there, because Hulk is the strongest one there is. Hulk is the only one there is. Only one there is. Hulk feels cold. And that's the end of the story. That the Hulk has come around to this. He finally won. Hulk just wants to be left alone. Guess what? You've won. Doesn't feel so good, does it? And that was the end of the Hulk. And that was the original ending of my short story as well. The notion that after all this time, Hulk has finally won. He's the only one there is, and then the enormity of being the only one there is finally dawns on him. And the last line of dialogue he has is Bruce Banner's line of dialogue from the very first page. He's effectively come full circle. And, I just was always very pleased with that ending.
It's a fantastic ending. It's one of those endings when you read that last page, and, let's be honest, it doesn't happen all the time in comic books.
Yeah.
But it's, in those 48 pages, when you read that last line, you're kind of like, oh, shit. It kind of hits you right in the face. Which I say it's not your typical Hulk story, but there is still action in it.
Yeah.
When he fights the cockroaches. There's Dale Keown does a fantastic job on the book. And I love that spread page where the cockroaches essentially chew like even the muscle tissue off of the Hulk.
They actually made an action figure of that.
Shut up. No, speak. Sorry.
Okay.
Don't ever tell your guests to shut up. Future podcasters.
I was at the Hasbro. I remember the first time I saw it. I was at the Hasbro office during Toy Fair, and I'm looking at the Hulk. And I'm going, "Holy crap! That's the Hulk from the end! Holy crap!" Because he's standing there, and there's pieces of his flesh missing. And you can see muscle. I mean, it's not quite as bad as that page at the very end of it. But you can see the places where the bugs have chewed into him. Holy freaking crap.
Yeah.
I actually managed to get one of those things.
Did you really?
Yeah, I bought it. It's no big deal. But it was just so freaking cool.
I've got to find that. You don't want to sell it, do you? We'll talk about it later. If you go and see those 2 pages, like when I was thumbing through the book at first, of course the pencils are great. Right. But then you see that, it's such a visceral image. Like, I don't even know if even Wolverine has had such a, it's just, like I say, the muscle tissue, you can see the circulatory system and everything. You even mentioned that.
Oh, yeah.
As it's stitching back together.
Yes.
Really, really cool. So there's still a lot of good stuff, even though it's not full of action, but a fantastic story. Yeah. Now, speaking of Keown and McFarlane, when I gave you the rapid fire a minute ago, you very quickly, might I add, went McFarlane.
Well, I wasn't sure specifically what you were talking about.
Well, I know.
I mean, if you're talking about the work on the Hulk, Dale.
Oh, okay.
Dale's work on the Hulk was amazing.
Yeah, classic.
But McFarlane, in terms of his impact on the comic book community, has got it cold. I mean, you know,
Sure.
He co-started a company that is coming out to this day.
Oh yeah. Producing great stuff.
Yeah,
too.
producing stuff. I mean, you know, so he's got his own freaking toy company. You know?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's killing it.
Dale, in the meantime, Dale has pretty much dropped out of sight. That's probably because, you see, Dale is also a musician. So basically, if his musical career is going well, you couldn't get him to draw no matter what, because he's busy with his musical career.
Oh, wow.
If his musical career is slow, then he's writing comic books so he can, then he's drawing comic books so he can, earn a living.
As far as like working with different artists, like like the collaborative process. Who I don't want you to. I mean, you don't have to say either one, but like who brought more to the table on the Hulk as far as the creative process goes?
George Perez.
Yes.
No question.
Future and Perfect. Yeah.
You got to understand, whenever I write any
Fantastic.
story, the final product is usually about 60 to 70% of what I really was envisioning in my head. Future and Perfect is one of the few endeavors of mine that is 100% what I saw. And that is entirely because of what George brought to the table. Which is funny, because what happened was the Italian artist who was originally going to do it then dropped off of the project. And Bobby still wanted to do the project because she really liked the story that I was coming up with, but we had no one to draw it. And then one day I brought my daughter Gwen to a Docs in a Box, one of those places, right?
Yeah.
To get something, I don't even remember what it was. And who's sitting there but George? And I'm going, George, hi, how you doing? Peter, how you doing? We're sitting chatting. And George says, I've always wanted to work with you on a project. And I said, have I got a project for you? And I described Future and Perfect to him. And he says, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I'm totally on board. So now this is before the days of cell phones. So I had to wait to get home so I could call Bobby and say, okay, I have an artist for Future and Perfect. And Bobby says, you have an artist? And I said, yeah, George Perez. She goes, oh, okay. And she was on board for that. And it was great. And then after we finished Future and Perfect, George said to me, this was so much fun. If you ever want to work on another project, I'm there. And I said, I have this project called Saxon Violence. Oh, yeah. And George drew that too. And I'm actually selling pages from that down over in my table at Artist Alley. So come on by tomorrow and buy pages.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome.
Okay.
So what are you doing now? Like, what are you working on now? Like, what's your passion project?
Well, right now I've got several projects I can't tell you about.
Oh God.
However, I will be announcing at least one of them at my closing panel on Monday.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
What time?
What?
What time? What time?
2:30.
All right.
2:30 in, where the hell is it? In the Galleria 2-3. That's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Right next door.
Right next door. Right across
Okay.
the hall
Fine.
here.
Fine. Well, then bring the recording thing. You can record it. In terms of comics, right now I'm writing Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, and having a tremendously entertaining, time doing that. I also have another comic project I said I will be discussing on Monday. I also have a feature film project that I can't tell anybody about.
Can you tell us, like, kind of what it is?
No.
God.
Because if
He's taking this shut up thing seriously
because if
now.
I kind of tell you what it is, you're going to figure it out.
Oh, so it's
So
something
let's
that we
just
know.
say that it is a movie based upon a currently existing property. Okay?
Okay.
So
We'll take
I
that.
think that should be fun.
I have a question.
Oh,
Turn it on.
and you have to
Turn it
go
on.
over to that microphone?
Well, we're recording. We're recording.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go, yeah.
So your Ben Reilly project,
Yes.
is he going to wear the hoodie, or you got a better intended costume?
Well, he's gone back to the original costume.
Yeah.
So that's what you're going to use.
Which, by the way, was a hoodie. which broke me up because people are going batshit nuts over the fact that he's got a hoodie because they're saying, "Oh my God, you're ripping off Spider-Gwen." And in the meantime, I'm going back and looking at the original costume, and the original costume had a freaking hood. It was typically down, but he had a hood.
Right.
So it's like when fans are screaming that John Carter is just a ripoff of Star Wars. It's like, dude, no, let's remember what came first. Ben Reilly and his original hoodie was way before Spider-Gwen. Way before. I mean, basically, I honestly didn't give a crap about whether he changed costumes or not. Costumes are of so little relevance to me. And, okay, thank you for not caring. And I didn't really care. And now Mark Bagley's original outfit that he came up with, I thought absolutely kicked ass. I thought it looked great. And 7 or 8 revises later through editorial input, we came up with the one that we debuted and fandom universally freaking hated it. I have no clue why. I have no idea what makes fans say, this costume is great, oh my God, this costume sucks. But I don't generally understand fan protests as a whole anyway. I don't get why fans want to condemn everything. I mean, I was on an escalator chatting with a woman earlier who said that men are wildly protesting that the Doctor Who is now going to be a female. And I said, you do realize that when they first had pictures of Christopher Eccleston, the fans hated him. Because he was wearing contemporary clothing. Why is the Doctor wearing contemporary clothing? He should be wearing something Victorian, or a cricket costume, or whatever the hell. You know, they hated that. That when leaked pictures of Heath Ledger as the Joker got out, everyone hated that. I'll tell you a story. I was on a panel at a convention. There were 3 other writers and me, and this was decades ago. And we were asked, what do we think of the announcement of Michael Keaton as Batman in the upcoming Tim Burton movie? The other 3 guys hated it. And these are freaking pros. They hated, oh my God, it's going to be a joke. They're doing Adam West. Tim Burton is just going to make fun of Batman, on and on and on. And they get to me, and I said, well, here's the thing. Tim Burton is a really talented director. Michael Keaton is a really talented actor. Just because they're primarily associated with comedy doesn't mean that they can't do a really good straight-up adaptation of Batman, and I, for one, am willing to wait until we see it on the screen before I make a judgment. It is the only time in my life that I've been seriously booed by an audience. They freaking booed. It was like I farted in synagogue. They were furious that I would have this reaction. Cut to several years later, same convention. I hear a couple of fans talking in a hallway, and one of them says, so have you heard they're going to be going forward with Batman Returns? And the other one says, well, I'll tell you one thing, it better be Michael Keaton and Tim Burton, because otherwise it's going to suck. And I was, yes! All right! Now we're talking. So, yeah, fans seem to react negatively to pretty much every damn thing. And they reacted negatively to the Spider-Man, to the Scarlet Spider costume. And Marvel's reaction was, we don't need this shit. Just go back to the original costume. And I went, okay. And in issue 3, I had him put back on the original costume. And I had a sequence where a young Spider guy is criticizing his costume, using all the complaints that I saw on Twitter. You know, it's like, you know, wow. What is with this costume? It looks like Spider-Side's costume. And it has the same coloring. And I can see your mouth. How come I can see your mouth? That's incredibly stupid. You know, that was all on Twitter. And what I loved was the fans who had no idea of the timing of this. Some of the fans said, oh my God, Peter David is so brilliant that he was able to tell how we would react. It's like, no, dude, I wrote that story well after I got your reactions. But fine, let him think I'm a genius. I have no problem with that.
You talk about Scarlet Spider. I have not read any of it yet. You say you're having a ball with it.
Yeah.
Why are you having a ball with this character as opposed to some other character you've done?
Because he's nuts. I mean, the thing is, Ben Reilly has been through experiences that we cannot even conceive of. Ben Reilly has died, as near as I can tell, more than anyone in the history of the Marvel Universe. And, I mean, he has, because he just got killed over and over and over and over and over again. And that screws people up. And you see, the thing was, the one complaint I was getting from fans was, why should I root for this guy? I mean, he's somewhat nuts. He was a villain. I mean, he says he's not a villain, but you know what? When you come up with a plan and Spider-Man tries to stop you, you're pretty much a villain by definition.
Right.
You know? And why should I root for this guy? And I came up with issues 6 and 7, which should ideally convince fans why they should root for Ben Reilly. Issue 6 is already out, and issue 7 will be coming out, I don't know, in a few weeks. And I'm hoping that that's going to turn around any indecision by the fans in terms of why Ben is the hero.
Well, I'm definitely going to have to check that out because it sounds amazing.
Okay.
What, if you could pick your dream project, like if Marvel or DC came to you, Image for that matter, came to you and said, Peter, what do you want? What do you want to do?
I used to always answer that question and say I want to do the Phantom meets Tarzan. But I wound up being hired to write a Phantom series that was published by Hermes Press, and they said you can do the Phantom meets Tarzan. Now the thing was, they couldn't get Edgar Rice Burroughs to let us do it. But okay, that wasn't really an issue, because there was a character in the early days of the Phantom, I mean the really early days, who originally Lee Falk was going to reveal was the Phantom. He was this kind of playboy millionaire type guy. And then Falk came up with the whole backstory for the Phantom. And that guy just pretty much dropped out of the Phantom strip for pretty much ever. So what I did was, I thought, if you ever met Tarzan in modern day, in the civilized world, you wouldn't know that this was the ape man. I mean, Lord Greystoke, he's a freaking Lord Greystoke. He dresses perfectly fine, he speaks perfectly fine. You wouldn't know anything about his background. I said, so what if this guy, who we had in the original Lee Falk strip, was Tarzan, or a Tarzan-like character? So I wound up using him and transforming him into the character, which was hilarious because, and I'm blanking on his name, which is annoying for me. When he first confronts the Phantom, nice, very nice.
Ain't that nice?
Hair's too short, but otherwise. Well, it is. What do you want from me? I loved when Zack Snyder first put up the picture of Aquaman. Can we get him on camera there?
Well, yeah.
There you go.
Did you get him?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I loved when Zack Snyder first put up the photograph of Jason Momoa as Aquaman with the long hair and the beard. And the modern day fans are going, what the hell? That doesn't look anything like Aquaman. And the older fans are going, no, that's Peter David's Aquaman. I was very flattered by that. I just hope he loses the hand. How freaking cool is that? I would love it if he loses a hand and puts on a harpoon.
That would be
and
awesome.
calls it a freaking harpoon. It's not a hook. I don't know why people have been doing that. But that is, look, can I take a picture? That is freaking awesome. Yeah, you need the hair and the beard, but other than that.
Rick, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rick and I did a show last night.
Oh, really?
This is the guy. Yeah. Yeah, we were sitting at the bar, and I said,
Could you
where
step back so I can-
where can you go other than
Yeah, step
DragonCon
right in
and have a beer with Aquaman, Arthur Curry?
Very nice, thank you. That's really
It's
great.
awesome, man. It looks so good.
Probably can't come by.
You did. I appreciate it, man.
He dressed like a bat. I can dig it. Yeah, I am loving. Well, I mean, I met Jason years and years ago at a convention in Australia, and he told me that he had just been cast in Game of Thrones to play Drago, and I went, perfect. Although I do feel badly about that the Conan movie tanked.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you did.
I saw a thing that says "Born on the Battlefield," and I said "Died at the box office," which it kind of did. But I'm sure I never actually saw it. But I'm sure he was great in it. Jason's a great guy.
Great guy.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you for coming by. I mean, you feel free to hang out if you want.
Yeah, man.
I've got a lot of people who want to see me in this.
Oh, of course you do, Aquaman.
Okay.
Of course you do. Hey, man, thanks for coming by.
Yeah, I promise I would.
Dude, it's awesome.
Now just
Gotcha.
just get a wig and a beard and you'll be perfect. Well, I'm right.
Right, you're right. You can be Peter Davis Aquaman then.
Right.
Peter, man, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, no problem. We done.
It was amazing. Yeah, man. We're close to an hour. Get you out of here. Get you out of here a little
Okay.
early.
Well, no, we got 7 minutes if we want to talk about other stuff.
Well, we can always talk about your secret projects.
Oh no, we cannot. we absolutely cannot do that. But I hate NDAs, non-disclosure agreements. I mean, although the most ludicrous NDA I ever signed was when Disney wanted me to write an adaptation of the movie Tron, not the more recent one, the original. And they had me sign a freaking NDA that I would not reveal any of the story elements of this movie that had come out 20 years earlier. And I'm going like, are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? He said, no, you have to sign the NDA. I went, fine. I signed the stupid NDA. And I said, okay, now you're going to send me the script? He said, we don't have one. I went, wonderful. I went on eBay and got a script of Tron, the movie that I just sworn I would not disclose any contents from, off of freaking eBay for $10. It was just the dumbest freaking thing. Yeah. But NDAs are just ridiculous.
I mean, as a writer, how do you approach, like, if you're going to write a 12-issue run of something, as opposed to like someone calling you and be like, "Hey, look, man, we want you to do this movie. We want you to do a story or a screenplay for this movie." How do you go about that? Like, what kind of structure do you use?
Well, I mean, as opposed to writing
a comic book. Yeah, a story arc.
A screenplay structure is completely different from a comic book screenplay. I mean, a comic book script is broken down panel by panel, and I describe everything that's happening in the panel, and then I write in all the dialogue. A screenplay is entirely different. It's the guy comes running down the street. Then you have the guy's name and he's screaming, "Stop! Wait! Come back here!" A cab whips around. Cab whips around. You're
Sure.
just describing stuff, but there's not that structured breakdown.
Right.
Also, when I write comic books, I pretty much come up with the stories and I send them off to the editors, and ideally they like them, and I go in and I write it. Writing a screenplay is much more involved. You have to write an outline first, and and a detail of what the script is going to be. Sometimes you have to write a full breakdown and write what's called a treatment.
Right.
And that can be like 40, 50 pages. So, that's all a part of the process.
What screenplays have been made in the movies? Because honestly, when I was researching you, I didn't know that about you at all. Like, I was like, holy shit, man, he writes screenplays too. He's
The ones that have been made weren't that good.
Well,
they were written for an outfit called Full Moon Entertainment, who's notorious for making films on a budget of something like $22. You know,
Kind of like my show.
I wrote. Tim Thomerson did a series called Transfers, and I wrote Transfers 4 and 5, and pretty much killed that series. Well, I mean, it was insane because the people of Full Moon told me to fully invoke my imagination, and then they gave no money. I mean, on Transfers 5, I went nuts. I mean, it was like I put in so much in that story. It was like my own version of Raiders. And they cut all the action sequences out, which is why the movie is 65 minutes, and that includes a 10-minute recap from the previous film. You know, I also wrote two other movies for Full Moon that actually came out much better. They were called Oblivion and Oblivion 2. They were not at all related to the more recent movie called Oblivion. They were actually Cowboys and Aliens, and that was long before the movie Cowboys and Aliens came out. And we had a delightful cast, including George Takei.
Oh, wow.
And, you know,
Awesome.
well, the thing was that we were batting around who we were going to have play the character of Doc Valentine. And I suggested George, and the director said, "You know George Takei?" And I went, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Can you talk him into coming out to Romania for 3 months? Because it's 3 months of shooting because we're doing 2 films back to back." And I said, "I'll give it a try." And I called up George and I described it to him. And he says, you know, "It sounds interesting, but Romania for 3 months?" And I said, "George, let me ask you this. When was the last time you played a character who was not specifically written to be Asian?" And George immediately says, 1963. He played a car mechanic in a race film. I mean, like racing. You know, racing. And he said, 1963. And I said, "This character is Doc Valentine, the town's medic and drunk. Wouldn't it be nice to play someone who was not written to be Asian?" And George says, "Send me the script." And he came and he did it, and it was wonderful. We also had Julie Newmar, who played Miss Kitty.
Wow.
Of course.
Of course.
Carl Stryken. If the name doesn't ring a bell with you, he played Lurch in the Addams Family movies, and he also played the giant in Twin Peaks. Carl's a wonderful guy. And we had a number of other people who you probably never heard of, but it was a really nice guy. And my father was in it. He was in Oblivion 2. You have to understand, my father, who was living in Israel as a teenager, came to America to be a movie star, and it never worked out. And I wrote him a small part into in the movie. He was a customer. You see, here's the thing with Carl's character. He was the mortician. 6.5 feet tall with a hat that was another 1.5 feet. And he was a psychic mortician. He always knew when someone was going to die. So he would go over to the person and wait for them to fall over so that he could catch them so they wouldn't bang themselves falling. So the problem was, anytime he went anywhere in town, everyone freaked out because they thought he was coming for them. So I had him walk into a little grocery store, and my father is a customer in the store. My father looks up and runs out. That was his part. My father says to me, "Now what's my line?" I went, "What?" He said, "What do I say?" And I said, "Hold on." And I went over to the director and I said, "My father wants a line." The director says, "You're the writer, give him a line." I went, "Okay." And I went back to my dad and I said, "Here's what we want you to say. I think I'll come back later." And I gotta say, my dad sold that line. Because he looked up, he saw Carl, and as if he was looking at death himself, he goes, "I think I'll come back later," and runs out. And it was really wonderful. And now the funny conclusion to this is that I took a ton of pictures. back then we used this thing called, what was it, film. And I brought the film to a local place to have it developed. When I went to pick it up, the guy who developed it says, "Was this taken on a movie set?" And I said, "Well, you figured that out, huh? Because it's all cowboys and stuff." And he said, "I thought so. I recognized one of the guys." And he pulled out a group photo that I had taken that has a number of the actors all smiling at the camera. He says, "This guy," and he points to my father. My father standing there with George Takei, Carl Stryken, Jackie Swanson. You would know her from Cheers. She played Kelly. She also was the girl who jumped off the building at the beginning of Lethal Weapon, who was half naked. So, actually, 3/4 naked.
That's good trivia.
But yeah, fun trivia. And I said, "No, that's my father." And he says, "I know I saw him in a movie the other night." And I said, "No, I can guarantee you that he's the one guy in this thing that you have not seen in any freaking movie." Oh, and the funny thing was George kept dropping in Star Trek puns. In his opening scene, he's staggering along and he's holding up a bottle of Jim Beam. And he says, "Jim, beam me up." And we actually had a screening. And I said to him, they're all going to blame me for these Star Trek puns. And we had a screening of the first Oblivion movie at the San Diego Comic-Con. And we had a packed house. And the moment he said that, somebody in the audience, there were moans, and some of the audience went, "Oh, Peter!" And I was sitting next to George, and I went, "Told you." Freaking told you, man. Okay, now we got to go.
Yeah. Mr. David, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thank all of you for showing up. Appreciate it. How awesome was this guy, man? How awesome was this guy? Yeah, it's awesome.
So tomorrow I will be at my table up in Artist Alley, which is about as far from here as it can possibly
Yes,
be.
it is.
I'm at table H31. I'm selling scripts from the Young Justice animated series that I wrote, various novels of mine, and for the first time ever, artwork. I'm selling George Perez artwork from Saxon Violins, every page of which is autographed by George, plus pages from The Incredible Hulk by a variety of artists, and Supergirl by Leonard Kirk and Robin Riggs. So come on by and give me money so I can afford to drive home.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a favor, sir?
Okay.
If I don't fall and kill myself.
Okay.
I'm the audio producer for Travis's podcast and a couple of Charles's. I'm wondering if I could get some sound bites. You know, I'm Peter David, and you're listening to.
Okay. What are we listening to?
You're listening to the Blazing Defender Report.
That's Travis. That's who you were just
That's
The Blazing Defender. Okay, I got it. Hi, this is Peter David, and you're listening to the Blazing Defender Report, because you probably have no life.
That couldn't have been better.
and the other show is called Breaking the Panel.
Breaking the what?
Panel,
Okay,
as in comic book.
got it. Hi, I'm Peter David, and you're listening to Breaking the Panel. And right now, I'm not wearing any pants.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I can do another one if you want.
No, they're good.
Okay.
You do another one.
We will
What's the name of yours again?
Blazing Defender Report.
panel by panel. Okay.
Oh, I should do panel by panel?
Yeah, do panel by panel.
Hi,
Then we'll-
this is Peter David, and you're listening to Panel by Panel. And when I think of you, I touch myself.
You do not even know how dead on
I
you are.
know,
with that.
man.
That's
That is so
No problem.
appropriate.
You would like any crackers or anything?
Oh, no,
I
I've got one.
Can we get one more? See, hey, I was about to walk away. The show is called Botched.
A D&D podcast.
Botched, a D&D podcast. It's long.
Okay.
Be real mean.
Be really mean.
Vicious as you want to be.
Okay.
It's 5 guys drinking, playing D&D.
Hi, I'm Peter David, and because you're living in your mother's basement, you're listening to Botched.
And this is
Wow, what the hell's
We're going to
going
use
on in
that
here?
for every episode from now on.
Oh, I missed it.
No. What are they coming in for?
the next one is
What is the next one?
it's the,
Justin Robert, yeah.
yeah, the jury show.
The jury show? Okay.
Thank you so
Oh,
much.
okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's take a picture. All right.
What did you in? Thank you again, sir. I appreciate it, man. It's awesome.
Pardon me, man.
And I was worried he wasn't going to say anything.